When you think of corruption in law enforcement, it's easy to imagine greed and power as the driving forces. But what if there's more to it? What if the mind behind the badge is hiding something far more complex? This isn't just a story about a corrupt cop. It's a dive into the psychology that twists duty into deception. What really drives someone to betray the very laws they swore to uphold? Corruption in law enforcement is a topic that elicits passion, and it's not difficult to understand why this is the case. The police, lawyers, and other officials who are supposed to enforce the law and protect society turn around and become the very criminals that the law is meant to punish, thus making society lose faith and begin to fear. But for every corrupt officer, there's a story that is not only about greed or power, but also about personality, environment, and psychological factors that make some people become corrupt. Personality is one of the most important factors that determine behavior, and this applies to law enforcement agencies as well. Take empathy, for instance. Empathy is the ability to put oneself in the shoes of another person and feel what he or she is going through, which is something that a police officer should possess. Indeed, how can one serve the public without knowing their fears, their suffering, their challenges? It's also been found that people with higher levels of empathy are less likely to be involved in criminal or delinquent activities. On the other hand, people who have an inability to bond with others are more likely to commit wrongdoings, including petty crimes and felonies. In the context of policing, empathy is not a luxury but a necessity in order to foster trust within society. Police officers who are genuinely concerned with the welfare of society will be honored and trusted. This trust can be the difference between a community that feels secure and a community that feels watched. However, not all officers are lucky to have this virtue in large measure. Lack of empathy may make it easier for people to objectify others, to see them not as persons with rights and emotions, but as objects to be used for one's own benefit. This lack of empathy is usually accompanied by self-entitlement, another factor that puts officers on the road to corruption. Corruption is defined as the misuse of power for personal advantage, and a selfish attitude only fuels such misuse. In some cases, the temptation of getting rich quick or the excitement of using the authority one has been given to break the law becomes irresistible. For instance, let us consider the example of bribe taking in the police force. A research conducted on the New York City Police Department showed that bribe taking was the most frequent type of profit-motivated case among the officers who engaged in career-damaging misconduct. Such acts of selfishness not only compromise the character of the individual police officers, but also reduce the credibility of the overall police force. Self-interested motives can also be a factor in corrupt actions, especially when one is manipulative. Self-serving officers may also be manipulative and bend the rules to their advantage, since they are in charge of the organization. This may begin with petty corruption, such as accepting small bribes, but as the adage goes, give an inch and take a mile. What begins as an ethical violation can easily progress to more severe misconduct, like fabricating evidence or using excessive force to effect an arrest. This is commonly known as the slippery slope of corruption. It implies that as soon as an officer starts practicing minor unethical behaviors, it becomes easier to justify other major unethical behaviors. The distinction between right and wrong becomes hazy, and soon an officer who began with minor, relatively innocent acts gets involved in corruption. However, it's not only the personality characteristics that are responsible for corrupt actions in the police force. The context in which officers work can also play a role to a large extent. Some of the factors that influence officer behavior include organizational culture, for instance. Each police department has its own subculture, a system of beliefs and practices that define the behavior of the police officers. In some departments, this culture may foster integrity, which will compel the officers to do the right thing regardless of the consequences. In others, however, the culture may be more tolerant of misconduct, where there is a blue wall of silence that prevents officers from reporting misconduct. Another environmental factor that can affect corrupt behavior is accountability, or the lack of it. Most of the police departments across the country have their records of disciplinary actions kept secret. thus denying the public the chance to prosecute officers who have gone rogue. In addition, laws like the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights provide officers with more rights, including being allowed to take a break before being interrogated, or being allowed to view the witness statements before being interrogated. These protections can lead to a situation where the guilty officer won't be punished, thus continuing the cycle of corruption. Peer pressure is also a significant factor. The influence of peers on officer behavior can't be underestimated. Studies have shown that working alongside officers with a history of misconduct increases the likelihood of engaging in similar behavior. The blue wall of silence, a culture of protecting fellow officers, can pressure even well-intentioned officers to remain silent about misconduct, further complicating efforts to address corruption within the ranks. Environmental factors like these create a challenging landscape for law enforcement officers, where the line between right and wrong can become increasingly difficult to navigate. But what about the internal, psychological mechanisms that drive corrupt behavior? Understanding these mechanisms is crucial for addressing and preventing corruption in law enforcement. One such mechanism is rationalization. Officers who engage in unethical behavior often employ cognitive rationalizations to make their actions appear socially acceptable. These mental strategies help to sanitize or neutralize deviant behavior, allowing officers to maintain a positive self-image even when engaging in corruption. Cognitive dissonance is another psychological phenomenon that can play a role in police corruption. Cognitive dissonance occurs when individuals experience conflicting beliefs or values, leading to discomforts that they must resolve. In law enforcement, this might happen when an officer's personal beliefs clash with their professional duties. For example, an officer who supports the Black Lives Matter movement might experience tension between their beliefs and the expectations of their role. To resolve this dissonance, officers might engage in behaviors or adopt beliefs that help them reconcile these conflicting values. This could involve participating in community outreach programs that align with their personal values, or undergoing training to address racial bias and improve community relations. By aligning their professional responsibilities with their personal beliefs, officers can reduce the discomfort of cognitive dissonance and act in ways that are more consistent with their moral values. Finally, moral disengagement is a cognitive process that allows individuals to justify behaviors that violate moral standards. Psychologist Albert Bandura identified several mechanisms of moral disengagement, including moral justification, euphemistic labeling, and advantageous comparison. These mechanisms enable individuals to commit unethical acts without feeling guilty by inhibiting the process of moral regulation. Well, that marks the end of today's video. We hope you loved and enjoyed it. On your way out, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more videos like these. Till next time.